What's going on here?
We're live now, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Susie. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to this morning's virtual meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board. Can I remind all participants that normal rules and procedure apply? For example, comments and questions need to be directed through the chair. As we are meeting virtual, proceedings may take slightly longer, so your patience is appreciated. While members of the public can view this meeting via YouTube Live, they will not be able to actively participate, I can never say that, or comment on proceedings. As this meeting is being live streamed, can I remind all participants that their conduct should reflect this? Okay, we'll go on to this morning's agenda. Item number 1, have we any apologies for absence, Caroline?
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from Councillor Tom Morstan. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 2, is there any declarations of interest? Can't see nothing. Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 3, minutes of the Overview Scrutiny Board on the 22nd of February. Can I ask if there is a true reading, please?
Agreed,
Thanks.
Chair.
Thanks, Dorothy. Thank you, Dennis, for seconding that. Agenda item number 4, pardon me, is the Executive Forward Work Programme. As you can see on the report, it's quite detailed. I'd like to ask any of the members if they've got any questions or comments on this report. Okay, none, thank you. Agenda item number 5. I'd like to welcome the Executive Member for Finance, Councillor Barry Cooper. He's here to give an updated presentation on his portfolio of governance and finance. I'd like to say, is it okay, Barry, all questions after your presentation?
Whichever way you want to do it, Chair, I don't mind.
Yeah, I'd prefer that, please. So, okay, I'll hand it over to you, Barry.
Thank you, Chair. I realise that this meeting will be viewed by the public via YouTube, so allow me to introduce myself. I'm Barry Cooper, Ward Councillor since May 2019. I represent the Newport Ward in Middlesbrough, which includes the area known locally as Gresham. I became the Executive for Environment, Finance and Governance in May 2021. I attended the OSB on the 9th of November 2021 to report on my environment portfolio and accepted the board's invite to return today to talk about finance and governance. In respect of the portfolio of finance, I received professional advice from our Director of Finance, Mr. Ian Wright. Ian can't be with us today, so his deputy, Mr. Andrew Humble. Andrew is our Head of Financial Planning and Support, so thanks for being here today, Andrew. As your Executive for Finance and Governance, I have the responsibility of ensuring that the Council operates efficiently, openly and fairly. I have some 50+ listed responsibilities, which you can see on Appendix 1, and they can be found on Modern Gov within the Middlesbrough Council's website, plus outside bodies that come to the portfolio holder, such as Chair of Pensions Board. I don't have time to go through everything today, so I intend to give you a flavour for the work I do. I am happy to take questions at the end of the presentation, as suggested by the Chair just a few moments ago. I'll start with human resources. I have a regular contact with our Head of HR, and my aim is to make Middlesbrough Council a smarter, faster and safer place to be employed, and it is with that in mind I can tell you that the Better Health at Work Award, which is coordinated by the Northern TUC with support from Public Health England, recognises the efforts of our employees. We have been accredited with maintaining excellence. This comes with a recommendation from the assessors that we obtain ambassador status. This shows our HR maintain outstanding working practices and improves our employer reputation. Furthermore, in February 2022, we put forward a matter for consideration. The subject was for special leave provision to allow parents who suffer a miscarriage to be provided with up to 3 days paid leave. The loss of a pregnancy can be extremely distressing, and we wish to support our staff, although through this difficult time. This will eventually be enshrined in law as the first reading of a new bill took place in Parliament on the 10th of December 2021. The second reading being on the 18th of March 2022. So we have shown our support early and enhanced our reputation as an employer of choice. I keep up to date by discussions with leads of service on articles I read from the Local Government Association press reports. Legal services. Middlesbrough Council has many legal obligations, for instance, ensuring we have a balanced budget, which I'll talk about later, time permitting. Ensuring that our activities such as CCTV surveillance is lawful and that due regard is given to human rights and data protection rights. I have weekly one-to-one meetings with our Director of Legal and Governance Services, Charlotte, who is present today. Thank you, Charlotte. My aim is to do the best I can for Middlesbrough people, as long as it's legal, reasonable and possible. Legal services include our monitoring officer, who in discussion with myself and agreement with full council keep the council's constitution up to date, the last update being January 2022. ICT services. Our technical services who make this meeting possible and keep our computers running are always in the background, but very helpful when we have issues, and I am pleased to say they are part of my portfolio, as is the digital strategy. Procurement. You will realise Middlesbrough Council buys lots of goods and services. The way we make sure we get good value for money is by being members of NEPO, that is the North East Procurement Organisation, which consists of a number of North East local authorities working together to obtain discounts by way of bulk buying. I attend these meetings each quarter at South Shields Town Hall. Membership of NEPO enables the council to operate within the resources available to it and to continue it to meet its various statutory duties, including the overarching duty of best value. I'm conscious that the board has other presentation reports, but I would like to mention my working relationship with Ian Wright, Director of Finance and 151 Officer. We have weekly one-to-ones to discuss items such as the revenue budget, currently sitting at £118,328,845, council tax, medium-term financial plan and capital strategy. These discussions ensure that the strategic plan is delivered effectively. Of course, the budget supports the Mayor's commitment to invest in Middlesbrough and transform service delivery for residents. It is intended that through this strategy, the Council can achieve the challenging financial targets faced in the medium-term financial plan period, whilst ensuring that there is a minimum impact on the level of service delivered to the public. Some of our discussions are loaded with facts and figures, which I question and Ian explains. My closing question is normally along the lines of, give me your experienced and professional opinion, what is going to give us the best result for the Middlesbrough people. COVID has been a very challenging time for Middlesbrough Council, and it would be wrong of me to fail to mention how well all our staff have managed to go above and beyond to ensure children schooling at home have help with computers, food banks and home visits, staff working from home, payments to help local businesses. Two schemes come to mind: COVID Additional Relief Fund and Omicron Hospitality and Leisure Grant Scheme, funded by central government but administered by our staff. Lastly, I think I will mention that you will notice I have often shared reports with the Executive Member for Regeneration, because we all know money is the root of all business. Two examples of this joint reporting are Middlesbrough Development Company and Nunthorpe Grange Farmhouse Yard and Barns Disposal. All reports can be found on Modern.gov, and I am happy to be contacted by any member who wish to ask for clarification on any matters that I am involved in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Cook, for that presentation. Yeah, I'm going to open it up to the members now. If you're not sure or you can't answer the question, Barry, I'm sure Andrew or Charlotte will come and assist you. So, as I say, I'm going to open it up to the members now. So, if you can raise your hand, and I'll take it as it comes. I can't see no hands at the moment, which is very unusual. Well, I have one for you, Barry. I don't know whether you can answer it or maybe Charlotte. Received the full council papers yesterday evening, and once again we have no executive reports. I'm just wondering, you know, it's November, I believe, since we've had some on full council, and the next full council after 30th of March is in May, which will be 7 months that we haven't, that the council have had no executive members' reports. Is there a reason for that, Barry? If you don't know, Charlotte, is there a reason for that, please?
I'm quite happy to send this to Charlotte's expertise, Chair, if that's all right. And if it's all right, Charlotte.
No problem, Councillor Cooper.
Thanks, Councillor Cooper. Chair, there are a number of reasons for not having executive member reports in the council meeting. So one of them is obviously there were a number of changes to the executive, especially fairly recently, and the constitution is permissive around the question of executive member reports. So it doesn't mandate that there have to be executive member reports at council. Obviously council has a role in hearing from executive and questioning executive on their portfolios. And we've been in discussion with the mayor and executive around how we best deliver information to council so as council can, wider members can ask questions. So we're still in discussions with the mayor and executive about how best to do that. And we plan to come to council to let you know as wider members what is planned in relation to that at the AGM. So we start afresh in the new municipal year.
Thanks very much for that, Charlotte. That's clarified that. Okay, well, there's no, as I say, there's no. Oh, yes, Councillor Thompson, your hand's up.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a question, actually, it's a comment. It was just in your introduction, Barry. You didn't point out that this is the second time you've stood as executive member. Why was that?
That was to save a bit of time, actually, because that's history, whereas we're here to talk about today, really. And again, I haven't really gone into anything about the environment because I did that last time with yourselves. I'm always happy to talk about that if anybody wishes to do so. Thank you.
Is that okay, Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the clarification.
Okay. I've got Councillor Halawi next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of a description of the role of the exec in general, is there a notional amount of hours per week that executives are meant to dedicate to their work? Because when you read the exec description of the role, you think there can't be enough hours in the week to have an overview of all of this. And the second part to my question is, you know, what proportion of the exec's reports that we have had and things that they do and talk to us about are actually directly linked to them themselves, or not just given to them by members of the democratic services or other officers? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that question or questions. I'm quite happy to talk about this because I don't have a clock that I say I'm starting now and finishing now. I'm 24/7, 7 days a week. Even when I'm away from the office, I take either a telephone or this laptop with a dongle, so I can always be contacted. So trying to put it in terms of how many hours I do or how many hours other executives do, I just can't define that for you. I can't give you a figure. I do what I need to do to get the job done. Sorry, what was the other second part of your question, Alma, please?
That's too woolly for me, thanks. I would like to have some clear definition. To what extent do executive members write their own materials in terms of reports, feedback, what they're going to say? I often get the impression they're not fully understanding what they're reading, as if somebody else has written their speeches or their reports for them. And I just wondered what proportion of reports have direct involvement from the exec members themselves. How much of your report, for example, would you actually personally be scribing or have done the research to find out the information for?
Okay, this one. I don't know if you can see that or not. That's 2 pages. 3, 4.
And then more generally, I wasn't really being specific
5,
about it.
6.
I meant in general terms.
Yeah, no, that's fine. What I'm trying to say to you is that I do have a lot of input. I take all the professional advice that I can get, because it would be silly of me not to take all the professional advice. But then I have discussions on a regular basis with the heads of service, and I put my points forward, and we work it out between us. I'm not a nodding dog. I don't just go yes because somebody said this to me. I question a lot because I think that's what I'm here to do, and I always try to get the best result for the Middlesbrough people. That's always my aim. And it's and why you're asking this, I'm quite happy to tell you I'm the same in the exec and with the mayor. I put forward what I genuinely believe, and we have a discussion. Lots of people don't agree with me. That's fine. I'm quite happy to take constructive criticism. I don't mind. I don't take offence, but I do try to have what I believe is the right questions put in to the right reports.
Okay, Barry. Okay, Councillor, I think you've explained this out. I'll move on to Councillor Story.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've got a question for Charlotte and a question for Barry, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem.
I just started to ask Charlotte, you mentioned that you're looking at alternative ways of presenting information at full council. Could you elaborate on what other methods you might be looking to implement in terms of the executive bringing reports to full council? I note that the Constitution, at section 5 of the Constitution, says, except where order of business has been varied by the monitoring officer or by a motion without debate, or varied by the council approving a motion moved and seconded but not discussed, the order of business at every ordinary meeting of the council shall be, and section J of that says, to consider executive matters, including reports of executive members. So bearing in mind that section 5 clearly states that unless otherwise decided by the council, we should consider executive matters, including reports from executive members. I'd like to understand a bit more about what the alternative arrangements might be. And the question to Barry would be, as the political lead, and it is, we are governed by the political leads of the council, not by officers. As the political lead, I'd like to know, seeing as we are now reconsidering executive reports to council and how we deliver that information, I'd like to know why you think it's not necessary for us to hear executive reports, and what you would like to see in place instead of them.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So I'll take the lead. Charlotte, do you want to come in first on that one?
That's fine, Chair. Yes, so the Councillor Story, the section of the Constitution that you referred to there talks about executive members' reports being on the council agenda, but the description of what is an executive member report is quite broad. So if, for example, Councillor Cooper brought a report about the pay policy statement, that would be an executive member report. So that's why I said it's permissive. So one thing that's being discussed is whether we have reports from any member or some members or every member. So there's a few things on the table at present, and it's not been determined yet. So I think, you know, that's what I can describe to you about the range of options that are available. The executive haven't said that they don't want the reports at this point. We're discussing the best way to deliver them so that they're a useful tool for council to hear about executive work. So it's a work in progress. It's a discussion in progress. And as I said at the earlier point in the meeting, there's nothing in the Constitution that mandates that you have to have a report at every council meeting from every executive member. So that's the point that we're working from in terms of the Constitution, Councillor.
Okay, Councillor Cooper, you want to answer your question, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I haven't said I don't want executive reports. What I do have is an open door policy, and there's members here who know that because as the executive, I'm quite happy to go out and join ward councils on their wards and look at all the issues and then try and get those issues resolved. So it all depends on what the actual council themselves want, Matthew. Do you want someone that sits in an office and bangs out bits of paper, or do you want someone who you can pick the phone up and speak to, and they'll come out and talk to you and do whatever needs to be done for the good of Middlesbrough? Thank you.
Okay.
If I can just follow up, Chair, just to give...
Of course you can, Councillor Story, yeah.
Thank you. Just to give a view on those statements. I want it placed on record that I think executive reports are essential, and they should be brought to full council, and they should be brought by all executive members, And every executive member should give a full report of what they are doing and how they are working in their department and what the priorities in their department are for the town. And we should be able to ask questions on those things. I don't think it should be individual executive members at each meeting. I think everyone should have to do that. And this may be something we'll have to consider at Constitution Committee in order to make amendments to the Constitution so that it's tighter on that. Because the bottom line, Barry, is yes, I can pick up the phone to you and ask you a question, and that's fine, but the public don't get to see that. It should be in the public domain. It should be questions asked in a public domain, in a meeting where everybody can see it, where the public can hear us asking questions, because that is called accountability. There is no accountability between a phone call for me and you. I can come and knock on your door, but that is not accountable to the public. And we are all accountable to the public, and we have to be in a meaningful way. And that's why reports are important. I take Charlotte's point about the fact that no decision has been taken, but a decision has been taken not to put the agenda item on the agenda for this meeting and all previous meetings from November up until now. So a determination has been made that executive reports will not be brought forward because they haven't been, and they are not currently happening. So let's not suggest that that this is some kind of consultation process that's been going on for some time. We haven't had exec reports for many months now. So yes, I appreciate you looking into other options, but as it currently stands, a determination has been made. And when I asked the political lead for one of the departments about why that determination has been made, I haven't received much of a response other than you could knock on my door. And as I say, that has a significant lack of accountability to the general public.
Thank you very much, Councillor Story. It's a very debatable topic, Barry, and we could go on a lot. There's hands up, Barry, so I'll just move on if that's okay. If you want to email Councillor Story for that reply, I'm aware you've got your hand up, Councillor Thompson, but I'm going to bring Councillor Hobson in first. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I'm on the same lines as Councillor Story, actually. I believe that we should have had reports until it was discussed, and if it had come out that we decided we didn't need reports, then that's absolutely fine. But this hasn't been discussed in full council at all, and I believe it should have been discussed in full council before the reports were stopped. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Hobson. Do you want to reply to that, Charlotte, or?
Just to say thank you, Chair, for everybody's comments, and they will be noted when we're in further discussions about what we do with the executive report. So thank you.
Okay, Charlotte. I'll bring Councillor Thompson in.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to make a point, really, to remind Councillor Cooper that his role here today as executive member to the OSB is for the OSB to hold him to account and to ask questions. And I think we should be allowed to do that. Otherwise, what is the point of having an overview and scrutiny board if we can't bring executive members and hold them to account? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Thompson. Take one more, Councillor Halawi.
It's just to say I support our fellow councillors who believe that executive reports should be brought to us unless they are determined in a full council meeting, as Councillor Hobson said, that they should be stopped. I agree that we need executive reports and some formal decision has been reached to indicate otherwise. I think that many councillors feel like us, actually, and I'm very, very disappointed that since November we haven't had any.
Thanks, Councillor Halawi. Obviously, by the reaction of the question, there will be a debate at the AGM about it, and I for one believe there should be executive reports for every council, and as Councillor Story says, the public to be aware of that. Okay, but I'd like to thank Councillor Cooper for an impressive presentation. You're quite welcome to stay at the end of the meeting, Barry, but you'll be a busy lad, I can imagine.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've still got ward business to take care of as well as the executive stuff, so I've got people waiting for me. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everybody. Thanks,
Councillor Cooper. Okay, we move on to agenda item number 6. Chief Executive's update presentation, Tony.
Thanks, Chair. I think Gemma's going to share the presentation. Do you want questions at the end, Chair, as usual?
Yes, please. Sorry, Tony. Yes, please.
Okay. So today, if we move on to the next slide, please, Gemma. just a couple of things I want to cover with you today. The first thing you'll note is no COVID. There's not really a lot to say about COVID these days. It's just here in the background, so I don't really want to talk up too much time with that. So I'm just going to cover kind of what we call LMT hot topics, so the stuff that LMT are tussling about with at the moment that will eventually make its way through the political system. I wanted to talk specifically about school exclusions because they're probably top of my worry list at the moment, and then a quick update on upcoming executive decisions, and then obviously, as always, time for questions. So in terms of LMT hot topics, the stuff we're looking at the moment, we're looking at reoccupation. So you'll be aware that government restrictions have been lifted, but we still do have public health advice. So we've opened up the municipal buildings, and staff are slowly making their way back into those buildings, and teams are slowly getting back together. We're not pushing that. We're happy for that to be quite organic. And then we're also looking at Fountain Court. So phase 1 works have been completed on Fountain Court. It now has larger windows that open, and I even took a photograph of one that was open to prove to staff that they did open. The place has been cleared, and the tender award for the phase 2 works, which will be the internal fit out, is just about complete, and that work will start in April. And from that, we should see occupation by September. There have been some tours that have been held by Rachel Thompson, who's been leading the fit out work, so people can get a sense of what the building is going to be like, and I think it's going to be great. But making sure that we've got the right mix of neighbourhoods. Neighbourhoods are the areas where staff groups will sit, making sure that they're configured in the right way for their particular area of the business and such like is the stuff that we've been dealing with at the moment. We've been doing some work on values and staff engagement. So the officers have been doing lots of work on values and staff engagement for some time. We had a session with the executive a couple of weeks ago now, and the question that we were posing there was, you know, senior managers have done a lot of work on the values and on engaging staff, but should we do some work? And I'd welcome the views of OSB on how well the values are embedded within the political makeup of the council. You know, so do members behave in a way towards each other and with staff that reflect the values, and should we do some work on that with you? So in each directorate, there's a piece of work that's been undertaken by the director with staff to say, well, these are the corporate values, this is how they're reflected in the way that we do business. Is that something that we should do politically? Because of course, none of us are the council, we are officers of the council, you are the council. So there's a question for you there in that. There's been a lot of to and froing on the strategic plan work plan. That's complete now, and there will be a report that goes to the next executive that will set out the kind of priority actions for the next year, some of which are funded through the budget process that we've just gone through, some of which are not. So we'll need further consideration and reports, but that's going to come through, and that's something that you might want to look at in the future. We've been looking at locality working, and I think there's loads of really, really good operational stuff going on with locality working. I think the strategic element of it isn't as strong as it could and should be. So we've been looking at how we strengthen that. And we're also now looking at extending locality work into Hemington, so that we get a locality officer there, based there, and start to hopefully deal with some of the issues that we've got in Hemington. Health and safety is something that we've been looking at as well. My particular concern there is around violent incidents towards staff, whether they be verbal or physical. So we're averaging something like 1 incident a week at the moment. I'm a bit concerned around whether or not there is the reporting on that is robust enough. So are we getting all the reports? But if we've got 1 a week, that's too many for me. And I think as a senior management team, we need to be really clear that we understand the issues and that we're looking to mitigate whatever the issues are to protect our staff. So that's something a piece of work that we've started. Loads of work going on around the town centre as usual. You'll be aware of the developments in Captain Cook, the 2 leisure developments that will be open soon. the work that's going on in Boho, the stuff that's going on in Centre Square. You can see the replacement to Melrose House going up, and us looking at, now we've got ownership of the Cleveland Centre, how we make best use of that facility and improve even more the sort of financial benefit to the council. So there's loads of stuff going on around the town centre. And then finally, school exclusions, and I've got some slides on school exclusions, so I'll talk about school exclusions now. I've got a little bit of data here. Just need to try and make it bigger so I can see it, because I can't see that. Have we got any way of making that bigger, Gemma? That's better. I think you've, is that the first slide? Okay, well, I'll try and do this from, I'll try and do this from memory. So the top chart that you can see are the number of permanent exclusions that we've had, and you can see that this year, 43-ish, I think it is, we've had as many exclusions as we've had in the previous 2 years, and we've still got a number of months to go. Now, those figures are perhaps skewed, and we need to dig into them a bit more because, of course, schools have been closed quite a lot over the previous 2 years because of COVID, but our figures are much, much higher than we would want them to be. And when we look at temporary exclusions, you'll see there that, again, our figures are pretty consistent over the last 3 years, and in my view, pretty high. And we're talking about, when we look at all schools, something like 2,600 to 2,700 school days lost through temporary exclusions. And you can see those figures, well, you might be able to see those figures by school. We move on to the next slide. This compares us to our statistical neighbours. So our statistical neighbours are drawn up from councils across the country that share the most similar kind of socio-economic profile and demography. And what you can see here is that in terms of our stat neighbours, in 2018-19, we were slightly above. So our stat neighbours, the rate of permanent exclusions was at 0.46, and we were at 0.5. What happened in 1920, which is the latest year that you can get this comparative data for, is there was those figures were halved across the country or within our statistical neighbours, and those rates went down to 0.21. Ours went down, but not by as much. So from being in line with our statistical neighbours, we now find ourselves 50% above the statistical neighbours. So although our figures look relatively stable, they actually if you were looking at this as a league table, we drop down the league table because we've got more exclusions, permanent exclusions, than our statistical neighbours would have, and greater than the northeast average, and greater than the national average. So that is an issue for us, I think. We move on to the next slide and look at fixed term exclusions or suspensions. You'll see there that our statistical neighbour rate was just under 20 in 2018-19, and that reduced to about 12. Our figures in 2018-19 were 46. So we were, you know, something like about 130% above our statistical neighbours. And if we look in the following year, then we're pretty much 200% more than our statistical neighbours. Again, much higher than the northeast average and much, much higher than the All England average. So what that tells us is that, for whatever reason, in Middlesbrough, children are far more likely to be temporarily or permanently excluded from school. And, you know, as the authority with the responsibility for education, and accepting the argument that the more time a child misses at school, the less likely they are to attain, that's something that we need to deal with in the best way that we can. So in terms of the council response, we've been working on this for a little while now, and there's much more work to do. There's been the implementation of a new outreach and inclusion model in January of this year, which is supporting children to remain in school through early intervention and support. Because kind of what I'm struggling to understand as the Chief Executive is children's behaviour in Middlesbrough much worse than everywhere else in the country? Or is there a lower level of tolerance and support to poor behaviour? We've got an ongoing and tailored challenge, support and training to schools. So we have a whole team that look at this, that sit in on permanent exclusions, that challenge schools around this sort of stuff. And we've also introduced a new special wraparound project with 2 secondary schools that involve the police and social care and early help partners. I think I saw a figure yesterday. I think it's something like 34% of our exclusions relate to children with a special educational need. Just going on to the next slide, Gemma. We've recruited additional access to education officers, and that provides greater challenge at the point schools notify us that they're going to that they're going to implement an exclusion. And I'm sure the board is aware that all of the secondary schools in Middlesbrough are academies, so none of them are LA maintained schools, and as such, all we can do is look to nudge and influence what happens in those schools, which is not something we can directly control. We're working with unregistered education providers to support them to become registered, because what we have seen over the last 3 years is the use of alternative provision within Middlesbrough has significantly increased, and it's at bursting point. And what we've also seen is the high needs budget that we have. We're having to use more and more of that, and we've had to dip into grants with the agreement of schools in order to maintain education provision for children who have been excluded. And then we've also got targeted mental health support for children and young people, although I would say that we certainly need a much deeper and wider CAM service in Middlesbrough, like many other areas. So that's a live issue for us at the moment. We don't have the solution, but what we do know is that the rate of exclusions in the town are much higher than elsewhere. We need to be very clear that where an exclusion, whether temporary or permanent, does take place, that is absolutely the last resort and comes after an awful lot of support has been offered to the child and the family. Just moving on to upcoming executive decisions then. So we've got the refresh of the strategic work plan. So I mentioned that, so that's coming up. There's a long list of actions and initiatives, projects, whatever you want to call them, that we'll be getting on with once these have been approved. The Skills Capital Programme for 2022. So that just sets out our responsibilities to maintain school buildings, and it's a pass-through of DFE grant really. So it's how we're going to use that, and there's some of that goes towards special educational needs and disabilities provision. There's another report coming through about the local cycling and walking implementation plan, and that's the second phase of Linthorpe Road. So that extends the provision of cycle paths further up towards Linthorpe Village. And if you want any detail on that, Richard's on the call today, I noted, so he'll be able to give you more detail on that. Improving how our highways is a piece of work that we've been undertaking for some months now. So we get money from the government through the local transport programme, and I think that's about £4.5 million over the next 3 years to maintain our highways. That's kind of used for routine maintenance, but what we do know is that our road condition, like in every other authority, has significantly deteriorated since 2010. And we know now that from the assessments that we do, that something like 15% of our roads are either rated red or high amber in terms of needing some restorative work. That comes with a significant bill. So we've been looking at that, and we've been looking at what the most cost-effective way is of dealing with the state of our roads. The highlight, I suppose, of that is that it would cost somewhere in the region of £19 million for us to deal with all those red ambers if we use the current methods that we use, which the work's done externally. It's not done by council staff because it requires machinery that's too big. and we don't have the resource. Council staff concentrate on the day-to-day maintenance. So we do it through a direct contracting. So NEPO, Barry mentioned NEPO earlier on, they've been out. They've gone out and they've negotiated prices that sit across the whole of the 12 local authorities. If we use that, if we just called off that contract, it would cost us about £19 million. There's some evidence there. We've done some research and we think that we could get that significantly cheaper, somewhere in the region of 18% cheaper, if we were to go out with a specific tender for this specific piece of work, which would last 3 years. So that's what this report is going to seek approval for. The medium-term financial plan had within it £15 million worth of investment in our roads over the next 3 years, on top of the LTP money that comes through TVCA. So this report will look for permission to spend that £15 million to deal with all those red ambers over the next 3 years. And it has within it a methodology for determining how they're prioritised. The Tees Valley Energy Recovery Facility Local Authority Special Purpose Vehicle, so that's the replacement for the facility that's over at Haverton Hill at the moment, which is due to be online by 2025. That report was yesterday, so apologies, that report slipped a month. Because we're in discussion with energy suppliers to make sure that the energy supply will be there by 2025. That issue will be resolved within the next few weeks, so that report will go to the May Executive. And then finally, just a short report. So previously, if we go back a few years ago, every time we wanted to tender something over £150,000, we would take an executive report. We now take a tender pipeline approval report. So all of those procurements that we expect to undertake over £150,000 are wrapped up in one report at the beginning of the year, and that just saves us taking 20 reports. The outcome of those procurement exercises would still go to executive to award a contract, but in terms of us undertaking the tendering work, then this report will give us the approval to undertake those tendering works and then take the outcome of that back to executive. And that's it for this month, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tony. So you're open up for questions, yeah? Okay. Right, I'm going to open it up to the board. Before I do, I'd just like to go back to the school exclusions, Tony. As I mentioned, my concerns of Monday's Children and Young People Scrutiny panel, which Councillor McCabe is chair, the lack of authority and power that the council has in questioning the exclusions from these academies. You know, I'm not saying they do it on purpose, but the actual lack of power we have, because it's okay, the council do a fantastic job of picking up the pieces, because that's what it is. You know, these, and as you alluded to, these more or less a third of the kiddies who are getting excluded have got special needs, which, you know, they've got mental and emotional problems anyway. And then they have this problem of being excluded without any education. And it's just a spider's web, because obviously that implements their family as well to cause, you know, it really is concerning, the lack of authority and power that the council has. I'm just wondering about your comments on that.
No, I completely agree, Chair. You know, and from my perspective, you know, I think we need to challenge schools. So I'm really interested as to why two secondary schools that serve very, very similar demographics, so they're both in deprived areas, how one school can have so many more exclusions than another. You know, what is going on in those schools? Is it the behaviour of the children that's different? Well, actually, they all come from equally deprived backgrounds, and probably they live in pretty much the same areas. So there's obviously something different going on in those schools. And I think we need to encourage schools to learn from each other and to be as inclusive as they possibly can be. But all we can do is encourage. We can't enforce it. And that is, you know, a frustration, because, you know, my concern would be, well, what is this doing to the life chances of those kids? you know, the 43 that have been permanently excluded, we need to try and find them another school. But those children who form the 2,700 days ish that have been lost this year from temporary exclusions, then they're potentially on the same trajectory, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're heading for a permanent exclusion, you know, and you know, if they're going to be temporarily excluded on a number of occasions, they're going to miss a lot of school. That's going to damage whatever chances they had of any sort of educational attainment, and that then sets the life path, doesn't it? So it's really, really important that we do something.
Yeah. And just before I move on with the members, I also thought it was concerned that there was actually an academy or a school in the authority that won't even give us details of their exclusions. I find that totally irresponsible. You know, I really do.
Agree, Chair. That, you know, and certainly I would welcome, because as officers we can only do so much. I would welcome any political assistance with trying to push the agenda along, which was my reason for bringing it here today.
Absolutely, Tony. Okay, I'll move. Councillor Platt.
Yeah, got back on now. John, just about the roads, Tony. How do you determine which is red or amber? Is it just the main roads, or is it a big pothole in a side road? I'm just interested. 15% of our roads are pretty bad. Most of them are pretty bad, to be honest. But it's a national thing.
It is a national thing. So there's they're all done by qualified highways engineers, all of the assessments, and they use a tool that allows us to determine the state of the degradation of the road, and that allows us to compare ourselves across the country, because there's similar or the same tool that's used in other areas. I don't have any more information than that, but Richard, do you know any more on
it? Not really, Tony. It's been a long time since I've been involved in that stuff, but it's
a technical assessment.
It is, and I'm pretty sure there's some sort of machine that helps with that, but it's ultimately, there's a degree of subjectivity in there.
But I think Councillor Platt, we haven't changed the way that we assess the state of the roads over, you know, so what we can very clearly articulate is that over years there's been a deterioration in the state of the roads in Middlesbrough. Now, you only have to drive around it to know that, I get that, you know, but we've got some science behind it, and it gives us, you know, a picture of the condition of the roads that we can kind of hang our hats on and be certain that, you know, 15% of the roads in Middlesbrough are red or high amber.
Okay, thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
Councillor Lally.
Thank you, Chair. Indeed, I'd like to talk about this question of exclusions. This has exercised our minds very seriously since Monday. This is the third meeting that we've been to where we've discussed exclusions. The discussion was thoroughly aired in Children and Young People's Learning Scrutiny panel on Monday, where I was very convinced that the local authority is doing everything it possibly can to mitigate some of the negativity of the influence and impact of the permanent and fixed term exclusions. We talked about this again in the Children and Young People's Social Care Scrutiny panel. Now, having been reassured by the officers that came to the Children and Young People's Learning Scrutiny panel that everything's being done, I can only put the responsibility for this on the academies. And I think that I know our influence is limited because the relationship between local authorities and academies is only one of influence and partnership. Given that the partnership relation isn't always there, as Councillor Saunders said, it's difficult to influence them. I think we really have to hold them to account, as you said, Tony. I would like to know how to bring political influence to bear on them. On Monday, I requested that we see the behaviour policies of the academies concerned, that we look at the actual numbers, that we look at the outcomes, that we look at the reasons why children are being permanently excluded, that we scrutinise where they're going and what's happening to them, that we do a trail of this, that we really shine a light on what these academies are doing in terms of their responsibilities. I mean, there's all sorts of points I'll make, but I'll just make that one now. How can we bring political influence to bear on this? you know, the disruptive behaviour accounts for about 35% of permanent exclusions, according to research that I've been studying. And that is also reflected in how are the behaviour policies implemented and how do they stand. So I'd like to come back, Chair, on a couple of other points, but just for now, Tony, have you got an idea of what we can do to influence these academies and to bring pressure to bear on them to re-examine their strategies? In 2020, there's an organisation called Just for Kids Law, and it reports that governors upheld 98% of head teachers' decisions to permanently exclude. And then when this went to the independent review process, half of those exclusions were thrown out of the window. They weren't justified. So this is really serious as well in terms of what independent review have we got on the decisions made by head teachers and governors to permanently exclude, because there we have evidence that half of them are incorrect and unjustified.
Thanks, Helmut. So, you know, I think we all want to jump into action straight away, me included. I think, you know, what I want to do is understand the issue much more. So, you know, I'm kind of peeling it a bit like an onion, you know. So I've said, well, let's have it by school. Let me see it over the last 3 years. I want to see it by year group next, as an example, because I don't know if we've got a particular issue with year 7s and year 8s who perhaps haven't been supported through the transition from primary to secondary school because of COVID. So arriving at secondary school and behaving inappropriately because they haven't been transitioned properly. Or is it year 10, 11s, and is it associated with, you know, issues that have arisen through COVID or not? We need to understand the nature, I think, of these exclusions much more, so we can then work with schools, hopefully, to look at reduce them. You know, but you know, it's very clear to me that some schools are putting in place far fewer exclusions than others. So there's got to be a difference in the way that those schools are operating, either with the support that they're bringing or with the behaviour policies that they've got, or the application of those behaviour policies. There's something different going on in some of our secondaries than others, because, you know, we know that when, you know, socioeconomic conditions have a massive impact on things like this, you know, but there is huge variation between UCA and other schools. You know, why UCA's exclusion so low compared to others? You know, and what we want is, we want the others to move towards UCA. That's what we want. You know, so it's only by really understanding the nature of what's going on, I think, that we can truly start to challenge, support, hold to account, and hopefully get some improvement.
Thanks, Joy. I'll bring you back, Councillor Alawi.
Thank you.
Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got two things, Tony, please. One is certainly on exclusions. First of all, I mean, the outward academies, you know, you can see there from the number of fixed term exclusions how high they are. Have they got, I mean, and you don't know this, but, you know, we need to look into it. Have they got a lower tolerance than other schools, or what? Unity City Academy, I do believe, have an extra classroom. Rather than excluding the children are maybe moved across to another classroom for a time. I'm not sure 100% on that, but I have a feeling that's something that does happen. But would it be possible for us to bring somebody in to this meeting from the Outward Academy and ask them various questions on the way they actually work? Would that be a possibility?
I think, Chris, that the scrutiny, the OSB board does have the power to hold an ad hoc scrutiny meeting, and that would probably be the way that it would do that. I mean, Charlotte will be able to advise further, I'm sure, if she's still on the call.
Okay. Was there a second part of that, Councillor Hobson?
Yeah, there is. The next bit is about the roads and the way we do the roads. We've just had, after about 5 months of asking, somebody's come along and repaired a couple of roads, a couple of holes for us in one road. But where those holes were, there were another 10, 20 holes round about, which they obviously haven't done. Now, wouldn't it be much cheaper for them to do them all at once while they're out there, rather than let them go and then have to come back again and go and come back again? Surely it would be much, much cheaper, Tony, for them to actually sort them out all on one go.
It would, but we need £15 million to be able to do that, and that's what this report that's going through executive is about at the moment, because we've only got a very, very small amount of money, that it's got to be directed to those that are the highest red. And what that means is that you go and do a high red and there's 3 ambers sitting around it, and that looks completely nonsensical, doesn't it? But if we do the 3 ambers around it, then there's a red somewhere that's not going to get done. That's the problem that we've got, because there just simply at this point in time isn't enough money to be able to fix the level of potholes that we've got. What this report will do is give us the ability to do exactly what you're saying, and what we'll do is we'll go and we'll repair whole stretches of road rather than potholes that sit in the middle of a road surrounded by potholes. So that's exactly what this report will allow us to do, which I hope will find your favour.
Right, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Tony.
much, Tony.
Councillor Davison.
Oh, thank you. My computer's playing up a bit this morning. I can understand totally about these exclusions, Tony. It's going to be a really hard job to get the schools on board because of them being all academies. But I wish you luck in doing that. But I'd like to bring one thing to your attention with regards to your report. You mentioned locality working. The young people's scrutiny panel and Children's Social Care Scrutiny Panel have been looking at the locality working, and we hope very shortly to have our report out. So I would hope you would have a look at that, our findings, before you start on spreading out a bit further. Thank you.
Absolutely, Dorothy. I'm looking forward to that report.
Thank you.
I know that work's been going on.
Thanks, Tony. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Chair. After Monday's meeting, I was absolutely shocked and in horror at the number of exclusions. And we did ask for numbers and figures, which weren't available. But, you know, it's a miraculous how the council can work, and you can deliver some figures today. Just on your numbers you provided this morning, there's 26 permanent exclusions from 3 schools alone, which is bad. You know, if we could find out, and like you said, you would like to drill into if it's a particular year, particular group, and where it's happening, it will be key to this. But we did bring a report to full executive, which was approved last year, on behaviour and exclusions, and we asked for a report every 6 months from the council, and we haven't had one yet. So this is it. There's a fundamental problem in the council that there's no checks and balances being done from these scrutiny panels. So I don't know if you want to come back on that, but we have got another meeting on the 25th of April, and we'll hopefully get a comprehensive report about the exclusions on this. Have you any comments on that, Tony, please?
Thanks, Dennis. I mean, firstly, you know, please accept my apologies if staff haven't been bringing reports that they should, because there's no excuse for that. Those reports should be brought to scrutiny, and I'll certainly take action behind the scenes to make sure that doesn't happen again. And I'll look more generally at the implementation of plans. I've got Gemma's on the call today. She performs a function for us in terms of managing performance, and she's a bit of a terrier when it comes to those sorts of issues. So I'm sure she would have clocked it, and it's something that we'll discuss, and I'll make sure that you do get your report on the 25th. But once again, I apologise that the officers haven't done that, because they should have done.
Okay, thanks, sir. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's actually about the cycleway that is going to be happening on Linthorpe Road. Can I just ask, is that in collaboration with You've Got This, Sports England? It's just I'm an ambassador on the You've Got This programme, and I know we've had a presentation regarding this. psychopath. So I just want to know, is it in conjunction with them? Thank you, Chair.
I'll pass this one on to Richard. He'll be expecting me to say that.
Thanks, Councillor. The implementation of it isn't, but the usage of it may well be. The implementation's coming from the Department for Transport through the Combined Authority, and there will inevitably be cycling initiatives linked to it, of which that is likely to be one of them, yes.
Thanks for the clarification.
Okay, I'll bring you back in, Councillor Lowy, before we move on.
Thank you, Chair. I've been doing some research around the exclusion issue, and apparently, if you're a child on free school meals, figures show that you're 4 times more likely to be permanently excluded, 27 per 10,000 as opposed to 6 per 10,000 for non-eligible free school mealers. Another issue is that children who have special educational needs are double the amount of children that are permanently excluded. I know there's some research, and I know that the government has only given us a very small amount of the funding that we should have, high needs funding for special educational needs pupils. I think it dropped from 146 million, was it, to something like 23 or 26 million? And that is significant in terms of the investment in supporting children with difficulties. And one of the impacts of all of these exclusions is that it's very expensive. So for a child who is excluded from school, the cost over time will be something like 370,000, including benefits, healthcare needs, criminal justice costs. Who's picking up this tab? Is it local authorities? How much are the academies investing in really supporting children to prevent them from being excluded, would you say? I mean, we have the pupil referral units. We need reports about what's happening there and how the schools are connecting to those. They're the units where children go when they're excluded for a limited amount of education. So, where do we go to? We need to really get the academies to focus on this, don't we? How can we make that happen, that we peel back this onion that you talked about? And even all these figures about special needs and poverty. I mean, you did say that even when we compare to our, similar authorities, we're still high up there in the stakes. So even given those factors, how are we still in this terrible position of being so worryingly busy excluding our children permanently?
Thanks, Can I respond to that, Tony? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, firstly, yeah, I've mentioned a number of times socio-economic conditions in the town, high levels of deprivation that we've got, and that means that we're probably always going to be higher than the All England average, and that was why I was so keen to see how we perform against our statistical neighbours. Yes, because absolutely. They share the same background as us. Yes, and that's right. What I don't understand is why we're so much higher than them. We just need to understand this problem more. Officers will keep pushing. I would welcome political involvement and the role that the scrutiny can play in the challenge and the support that we can bring to try and deal with the issue, because I'd like to think that all of the interested parties can get around the table and agree something that means that we see a reduction rather than us getting into conflict over it. But, from my perspective as the Chief Executive, I'm very clear. I want to see those figures come down. In terms of the impact on finances, there's a piece of work that's going on nationally at the moment that's potentially looking at sort of passing the financial responsibility exclusively over to councils. I'm glad Andrew's on the call. Andrew will pick me up if I get anything wrong here and might be able to add to it. But the cost basically is assigned to a high needs budget, and that can sit, it almost sits as a provision, so it can sit with a negative or a positive balance. Ours has a significant negative balance at the moment, and we've just added to that negative balance because of the extra investment that we've had to put in because of the high numbers of exclusions. I think it's somewhere in the region of £4.7 million, Andrew, for us.
Approximately like 4.5 to 4.7, yeah.
Yeah, so we currently have a deficit on our high needs budget of £4.7 million. If the government are going to pass that over to local authorities, then absolutely, like every single other Chief Executive in the country, I would want that issue resolving before the responsibility was passed to us, because otherwise we just get a financial headache. So that work is going on nationally at the moment, and I was on a call last week actually with the DFE about a programme of work that will take place in Middlesbrough to try and help with kind of easing the pressure on our high needs budget. But there's no detail behind that yet, and until I see the detail, I'm not even going to get close to feeling comfortable. So all of those issues I think that you've raised are right and valid. I'd like to think that the way that we deal with this matter is, in collaboration with schools, and that we all agree something. You've only heard from me today. We haven't heard the issues that schools are facing on a day-to-day basis. So to be fair to them, I think they need the right to tell the story from kind of their side, and hopefully we can come up with some actions that we all agree. But I definitely would welcome. We had a chat in the car park a couple of weeks ago, Alma. I would definitely welcome some scrutiny involvement in this as an issue.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Jeff, could I
George.
just say as well, please, that the one little bit of hope at the end of the tunnel, possibly for me anyway, as an Ofsted inspector, is that I've been reading the new Ofsted framework, which says that if there's a single fixed term exclusion, this is a debate, it's in the framework, but it's being debated by the National Association of Head Teachers. A single fixed term exclusion might mean that a judgment about the school's Ofsted report would mean it can't get an outstanding. So the Ofsted is now very keenly looking at exclusions permanent and long term, and it's really going to impact, I think, on the judgments. And the head teachers obviously have got debates about this, but I think that's a bit of light to think, yes, big boots are coming to bear on this, and the schools really need to get their act together to look after our young children. And I know that there are challenges with young people. I've been a teacher for 50 years. I understand the challenges in school and in the classrooms, but we can't have this situation continue where we put our children into places where they're not going to have the best possible chances to realise their life's dreams and ambitions.
Totally agree, Councillor Lowry. Totally agree. We'll do one more question before we move on. Councillor Davison, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just a very quick one, Tony. Each child is funded to attend a school. So if that child is excluded from a school, does their funding move with them, or does the school actually keep that?
Don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid. I'll get that answer. I'll get that answer for you. I don't know.
Thanks, Tony. Councillor Thompson, your hand was up and then it was off. Did you have another question, or did you just forget?
No, sorry, I forgot to put it down.
No problem, Janet, no problem. Well, thanks very much, Tony, for that presentation. Once again, very detailed and very interesting. You're quite welcome there to keep on to this meeting. I realise you were a busy chap as well.
All right, thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll go to agenda item number 7, which is the Scrutiny Chair's update. We'll go down the list as normal. Adult social care, Councillor Platt. Jim.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Adult Social Care and Services Scrutiny Panel last met on the 2nd of March. This year, of course. Eric Scully, Director of Adult Social Care and Health Integration, and Katrina Jackson, Advanced Public Health Practitioner, were in attendance to provide the panel with a general overview and introduction to the new topic, which is the role of the voluntary and community sector VCS in supporting adult social care with a focus on COVID-19 recovery. Areas of discussion included details of the impact that COVID-19 has had on the operation of VCS organisations and the ways in which the services were delivered. Details of the types of support that VCS organisations have provided to health and wellbeing services. Details of financial support provided to VCS organisations during the pandemic and opportunities for the future working. The Director of Adult Social Care and Health Integration also provided an update to members regarding the integration of health and social care. The panel's next and final meeting for the municipal year has been scheduled to take place on the 30th of March, when the panel will continue its investigations.
Thanks, Councillor Pratt. Thank you. Next on the line is Children, Young Person, People's Learning Scrutiny Panel. Councillor McCain. Dennis?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Our last meeting was held on Monday, the 21st. In that meeting, we had a presentation for information was presented to the scrutiny panel that detailed the pressures across the education, health and social care with regards to children, young people with SEND and those at risk of exclusion, which we've already touched on. It was highlighted to members there has been a 63% increase in referrals for statutory assessment. The interim review of educational healthcare, IHIPS, has risen by 55%. This has given an additional pressure within the service, and recruitment is ongoing, and agency staff have been employed to help do these reports. There's been 20% increase in the HECIPs to be maintained, and there has been a rate of exclusions, as we've already heard, of 43 children permanently excluded, and 34 of these are SEND, which is very disappointing. Detailed information will be presented to the scrutiny panel at the next meeting on the 25th of April, with more information, hopefully a more detailed explanation of why this has happened, so we can drill into this as a scrutiny panel. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Okay, can I just clarify? You said 40 to 34, there's 34% of that 43, Dennis. You just
34% are SEND.
Thanks, Dennis. Okay, next on the list is Children, Young People, Social Care and Scrutiny Panel, Councillor Davison. Dorothy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The Children and Young People Social Care and Services Scrutiny Panel met on the 21st of March, which was Monday. Guest speaker was Carolyn O'Neill, North East Regional Children's Improvement Advisor with LGA. She was in attendance at the meeting to provide the panel with a presentation in relation to developing a council-wide approach to children's services. The chair of Children and Young People's Learning Scrutiny Panel, Corporate Parenting Board, and the executive member for Children's Services also attended. That was Dennis and Chris, both attended the meeting, and Councillor Smiles. The presentation included several short videos showing how young people were preparing for adulthood through employment, friends, relationships, and community independent living and health. There were also interviews with 3 young people with special needs living in different independent settings, talking about their experience of living independently. Carolyn also provided the panel with a brief overview of SEND review. In addition, the panel received an update on progress on Children's Services Improvement Plan from Executive Director of Children's Services, with a focus on the most recent Ofsted monitoring visit, the Children's Services, in December 21. The panel's next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, the 26th of April, and will be the final meeting of this municipal year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davison. Next on the list is Culture Communities Scrutiny Panel, Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Chair. At the March meeting, the panel was joined by Havinder Sembai, CEO of ASB Help, and Katie Anderson, Practitioner Support Manager, as well as our internal officer, to discuss perceptions of crime and antisocial behaviour. Antisocial behaviour help had featured in a recent Panorama documentary which looked at antisocial behaviour in Hemlington. The panel heard about the work ASB Help do and were provided with information on the community trigger processes, as well as learning about the ASB pledge, which we hope the council will sign up to in the future. All this will be set out in our report, which will be available early April. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor McIntyre. Next on the list is the Economic Development, Environment and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel, Councillor Stefan Walker. Stefan?
Thank you, Chair. The previous meeting for the EDEI Scrutiny panel was held on Wednesday, the 9th of March. The panel was scheduled to consider two core topics. However, our guest speaker from City Fibre, who was going to update the panel and take questions on the rollout of their digital infrastructure, was unwell, so should be at our next meeting. We did have two guests, however, for our green strategy review. The first guest was the markets manager from Sandwell Borough Council, and he gave the panel a presentation on their solar outdoor market, which provides a complementary mix to the established town centre retail offering. The second guest was the principal development officer at Sheffield Council, who gave the panel a presentation and review of their award-winning Greater Green scheme, which essentially transformed various tarmacked areas in the city centre into green spaces. The panel considered sorry, I've got a slight stammer. The panel considered the two presentations in relation to their application to the development of Middlesbrough's town centre, and the potential for this on both topics will be included in our final report, which I believe is going to be in April or May. Our next meeting is scheduled to be held on Wednesday, the 6th of April. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Walker. And last but not least, once again, Health Scrutiny, Councillor Davison.
Right, thank you very much, Chair. The last Health Scrutiny meeting was held on the 23rd of March. At the Health Scrutiny panel meeting, this is for you on the 23rd, was held on the 8th of March. Members received information relating to its review into health inequalities from the Tees Valley CCG and the Council's public health team. The TVCCG informed members that health inequalities across the Tees Valley were generally worse than the English average. Specific areas included high rates of obesity and smoking. As such, the TVCCG identified 5 priority areas that would help tackle health inequalities. These included restoring and strengthening leadership and accountability, and achieving this required a need to work collaboratively, especially with system partners, including the local authorities. The Council's public health team panel also informed members that health inequalities needed to be reframed with the most effective means of addressing them, including structural changes to individuals' environments and intensive support for disadvantaged population groups, all of which needed to be stated when those groups were young. Members were also informed that health inequalities were driven by complex interaction between lots of different factors, all of which have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Approaches to tackling the problem of health inequalities revolve around place-based action that is encompassed, civic services, and community-centred intervention. The panel were keen to understand its health inequalities were solved, and were told that as these centred on preventable differences in health status, it was possible to reduce those inequalities, but a long-term approach was required. The panel also received its COVID-19 update and heard that Middlesbrough was placed 133 out of 149 in the league tables and averaged 200 infections per day, a situation that was stabilising. Hospital admissions were also stabilising, and critical care cases were also low. As with prevention updates, vaccination rates in the town remained low. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. Okay. I'd like to thank all chairs who have given updates to their own scrutiny panels. Thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda item number 8, which is the town centre update. We've got Richard Orneman, who's Director of Regeneration. That's right. Richard, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a presentation. It's just a very short one. It's just a list of prompts for me that I'll put on the screen, if that's okay.
Yeah, we take the questions after your presentation, Richard, if that's okay.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Yeah. sure I get this on correctly. Can you see that?
I certainly can. Can all members
Right.
see it? Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So it was just to give a brief update about where we're at with the town centre. I went through this recently with OSB, well, a good few months ago anyway, so I won't dwell too much on this, but it's just a kind of reminder of the challenges that we're facing. We've got a shrinking retail sector, we've got shopping habits that have changed, we've got people working different patterns these days, and Middlesbrough town centre, like everywhere else, is exposed by those challenges, but we're surviving. I think where we've benefited is where some of the retailers have shrunk their presence in Tees Valley, they've retained a presence in Middlesbrough. So we are struggling, we are facing difficulties, but possibly not as bad as it could have been, and potentially not as bad as it could get. We do, though, have a higher than national average vacancy rate. I do feel, though, when you walk around, it is not as obvious, the vacancy as in other places, but that might just be a subjective perception. We're still very heavily dependent on retail, very low representation of leisure. The balance is all wrong. But one of the biggest issues that we've got is these poor perceptions of the town centre and visiting the town centre, largely because of crime and antisocial behaviour, and at the very least, the perception of antisocial behaviour. We do have the Future High Streets Fund and the Towns Fund, so they are providing us with some opportunity to create change. And as you will know, and we'll cover, the council has acquired a number of properties which have allowed us to do things that we wouldn't have been able to do if they were still in private sector hands. So a basic figure that we've got is we need to move on from retail, and we probably need 50% less retail space than we've got now. We've got a specific target from the government through the Future High Streets Fund to remove about 30% of it, but we probably need to go further because COVID's accelerated that challenge. We do get a lot of advice and support from the government. We get a lot of interaction with their specialist advisors on town centres, and they do give us a lot of feedback. And one of the things that they've fed back to us is the strategy that we've got is fine, is good for what we're trying to do. But as Tony's mentioned earlier, we need to look a lot more broadly than that. And one of the things that they feel we need to do more of is promoting and managing the offer that we're moving to. So communicating those changes and letting people know what it's going to be like and what it's becoming like. We also look at this issue around town centre versus the centre of town. People tend to think of town centres as the shopping core, whereas what we need to do is start thinking of it more as the centre of a town. What facilities would you expect to find in the centre of a town, and try and make sure that we get those facilities in there, and that won't be retail. So just a very quick summary. As I said, the feedback we get from the Future High Streets Fund team is your strategy's fine, but I think what we're conscious of, and as Tony referenced earlier, and we're talking to other partners about, it's kind of fine for where we are and what we're trying to achieve around the retail and the buildings. There's a lot more needs to be in there, and a lot more needs to be done in partnership around things like antisocial behaviour, because it has such a big impact on the town centre. So just in terms of progress, we've purchased Captain Cook Square. We're in the process of converting that to a leisure offer. We've got Lane 7 who've signed up for 60,000 square feet in the old TJ Hughes unit, and they should be on with their works at the moment, and that should be open kind of early summertime probably. Next door to that, where Peacocks was, we've got the Wired Lobby who have signed up to go in there, which is the esports business. And we're expecting some quite exciting things happening in there, and there's a lot of connections with the university in our own digital city. We've got a host of other inquiries, a few of which are at kind of heads of term stage. Obviously, I can't discuss what they are until they're signed. But we're looking at active inquiries that would fill all of the remaining space in the square and down the sides of the first stretch. The work that we need to do around that to make all of that knit together and make it a nice place to visit is we've got some external works that'll be undertaken again early in the summer, and we're spending quite a lot of the Future High Streets Fund and Towns Fund money on new lighting schemes in there, so it'll make it a much brighter and more pleasant place to visit, particularly things like the underpass through into the car park. We've then got the Cleveland Centre, which again we purchased recently. Now the Cleveland Centre will operate as a shopping centre for some time to come. It does work financially for us to keep running it as a shopping centre, certainly for now, but we appreciate in the longer term that might not be the case. So we're looking now at, in the longer term, is that a building that gets subdivided? Does it have different quarters or sectors within it? Does it have different offers other than retail in there? Do we try and concentrate the retail in one part of the centre? Again, over a significant period of time, because it does function as a shopping centre today. But we're not really under any great pressure to do anything with the Cleveland Centre and take that action at the moment. So that's one that we're going to be looking at and working with partners on for quite some time. We're also working closely with Teesside University, again, on some of the issues Tony referenced earlier. We need to work with them a lot more on integrating them and their students into the town centre and making sure that the town centre is a good selling point for them when they are recruiting and retaining students. We purchased the House of Fraser, similar to the Captain Cook and Cleveland buildings. And at the moment, House of Fraser are continuing to trade from there, but obviously that could end at any point, and we need to have a plan B for that. So we're currently working up some options around that, which would involve, whichever way you look at it, a mixture of food and beverage, perhaps a small amount of retail, perhaps a bit of residential and potentially some office space in there. Church House is one of obviously the big empty buildings in the town centre, and we're currently working with Joe Mast on a project that would be part funded by the Future High Streets Fund that would bring that back into use for accommodation. That's quite a long way down the line in terms of the financial modelling and all the work we do around that. And hopefully we'll be taking that forward for an approval at the Town Deal Board in the next few months. Around the rail station and Exchange Square, you can already see some of the changes that are happening there, creating a new square, much nicer place to be, hopefully more events going on in there, but also investing in some of the historic buildings around it. The work that's going on in the rail station is obviously significant in terms of financially. There's the work to the track and the signals, but there's also the undercrofts all going to be done out fairly soon. I think the site cabins will be established in the next few weeks, and they'll start some of the preparatory work, and that will be cultural and business space in the undercroft. There's some remodelling of the internal part of the station, and obviously then the track and signalling works to do as well. Centre North East continues to be an ongoing problem for us. Very big empty building in private ownership, and I think it's fair to say that whoever owns it, it's a challenge because it's such a big building and the solution for it is going to be an expensive one. So we're currently working with the owners, exploring pretty much all of the options. We would obviously prefer it to be brought back into use for some good quality residential, but the numbers have got to stack up, and there's a whole host of factors in there that have made that a very difficult project for anybody to bring forward, and it still remains a very difficult one to bring forward. Centre Square, obviously the buildings 1 and 2 have gone very well. There is a little bit of space remaining in there, but again, we have active inquiries around that and people who are going through the process of signing up for that. And you will have seen the steel work for Building 6 at Melrose House, or the former Melrose House site, coming out of the ground and quite visible on the landscape now. We'll continue to work on Centre Square in terms of trying to get occupiers for future buildings, but also with our own move to Fountain Court, there'll be questions about what are the best options for our current civic centre site, and obviously that will come forward for political approval at some point. One of the issues I wanted to flag was Zetland and Zetland Car Park. When we're looking at development of Middlehaven, everything that wants to go there is very car hungry, which is not something that we want to suddenly start creating acres of car parking over there. There may come a time when a multi-storey is required at Middlehaven, but that's certainly in the future. It's not now. And we need to have a good look at how we can make Zetland Car Park the car park for Middlehaven. And that might mean some remodelling. It certainly means some improvement to the journey from A to B. And that's a challenge that we need to crack at the moment. And then obviously there's a lot happening at Middlehaven. I wasn't intending to cover all of that now, but obviously Boho X is well on. We've got other commercial buildings in the pipeline, the housing's in the pipeline. There's all the other things that are happening around there. That's going to be a very active development site for a good number of years. And obviously all of that impacts upon what is and isn't viable in the town centre. And the more that happens at Middlehaven, the more viable that becomes. So that was just a quick run through. If there's anything obvious I've missed or anything anybody wants to ask for progress on, I'm more than happy to cover it. And it was really just to throw that open for questions. I'll take the presentation off just so I can see everybody, Chair, but if I need to refer back to it, I'll put it back on.
No problem, Richard. Yeah, if you check that off and then I can see everybody. I know where the hands are. Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions, if that's all right. My first question is, you didn't mention Gurney House, which in my view, this is a blight. You come across the A66 and it's in your face. It's starting to suffer from vandalism. And we've got lovely buildings up, like the Captain Cook's Square, the House of Fraser and Cleveland Centre. And we're doing all these up, and I'm all for the development of the town centre. But Gurney House it's been empty a lot of years now. I remember when it was Cleveland County Council, and when I worked for Cleveland County Council, I was based in there. So I'm just wondering why you haven't mentioned that. And my second question is, I realise that there's going to be a lot of development. TJUs, the go-karting and bowling alley, and that Peacocks. And my issue was around the parking. Now we've got Brental, but Brental car parking closes at 7:30 to 8 p.m. Yet these facilities are open till 2 a.m. in the morning. And why can we not extend that car parking? Because people are going.
You froze there, Councillor Thompson. You froze there for about the last 30 seconds. So
it was just the ending was just that we would end up having car parking near residential properties in the street. So I'm just wondering about the car parking. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Janet. Yeah, Richard.
Okay, the first one, Gurney House. It was actually on my slightly longer list that I had on. I took it off, but I will cover it. The building itself is owned by Joe Mast, and they own quite a bit of the site around it as well. And we own some, they own some. And we've had discussions with them fairly recently about, do we put all of that together? Do we look at a comprehensive redevelopment of that area? And realistically, Gurney House would need to be some sort of commercial development, some sort of office, something like that. It possibly wouldn't work for residential. Otherwise we probably have pursued that with them by now. So it's a challenge, it's a difficult one. It's very similar to Centre North East in that it's not something you can do in bits. It's something it's an all or nothing situation, and it's a very expensive one. So we are trying to work with the owners to look at a solution for it. But realistically, we've said to them, let's get Church House sorted first and then come back to that one, because it is too much financially for anybody to take on at the moment. The second point about the car park issue, absolutely recognise that the car park hours need to change. What we're not looking to do is change them before these businesses have done the fit out and opened up, but we are looking at how we open that so that it aligns with their opening hours, because the last thing we want is somebody Even from a commercial perspective, we don't want somebody going and parking on the street when they could be paying for council car parking in a safer and more protected environment for them.
Thanks, Richard. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Chair. Richard, you mentioned the development on Middlehaven, but I know you might have been on your long list. The urban farm, that was approved over 2 years ago, and it's still wasteland. Could you give us an update on that, please?
Yes, I can give you a partial update. The site that was identified for it originally, there was some work done, some designs done, and it looked like it was going to be too big and too costly for the organisation that was bringing it forward. They've subsequently had a change of leadership, and their new leadership wants to have another look at the project, but the chances are it will not be on that site purely because it's too big. So we've proposed an alternative site, which is only just along from there, which is a bit smaller and probably a bit more financially viable for them. But until their new leadership gets themselves kind of acquainted with the project and makes a decision as to what they want to do, we're not going to see any progress on that one at the moment. But it is still our aspiration to do it. I think it's still their aspiration to do it, but it's got to be at the right size for them.
Hi, Richard.
I can't see no more hands. I've just got a couple of questions, Richard, for regarding the land that the council owned where the snow centre was supposed to be going to. Is there any news on that? Is it up for sale? Have we got any people interested in it? Or
the process that we're going through is we agreed at executive an exclusivity agreement with BCEGI, who are our development partner at Middlehaven, for them to go and look at a number of different options around what we call big box leisure. So leisure attractions that are a large self-contained thing, as the snow centre would have been. The thing that they're looking at the moment and testing the viability of is, as we've mentioned before, an arena. The arena is a very exciting and very attractive proposition for a town to have, but it's also a very expensive one. So at the moment, they're looking at how you would construct the finances around that, what it would require to deliver it. So at the minute, you could say, you know, all eyes from our perspective are on an arena, but we aren't ruling out other kind of big box leisure alternatives, either if that one doesn't stack up or if something else comes forward in the meantime. But we're probably a little bit away from a conclusion on the arena as to whether it's something that we're going to pursue, you know, full throttle, or whether it's something that might just remain an aspiration. There's a lot of work to do on that to understand it.
Thanks, Richard. And just once again, I'll just quickly, you know, you mentioned we've bought now the council own the Cleveland Centre and the Captain Cook Centre, and I just think it's relevant. I know it's a strong point Councillor Marston brings up about the Endeavour, the ship that was once hanging from the Cleveland Centre, and I think it would be really good for it to be brought out of its mothballs and put in one of them centres which the council own. I just want your thoughts on that.
I don't have any particular view on it in terms of where it should go. I think it's something that people who've used the centre previously have got an emotional attachment to. But I think it's always going to be one of those things that it's going to cost us more to do it than we'll ever see the benefit from. So at the minute, it's not that we've ruled it out, we just haven't got round to sorting that or really coming to any sort of decision on it.
Yeah, I just think it's so relevant to the town, you know, the Endeavour and obviously Captain Cook Square, you know, it is, but that's just my personal opinion, Richard. Councillor McCabe, again. Did you have your hand up there? You're on mute.
Yes, I did. Sorry there. Yes, another question for Richard. With the purchase of the Cleveland Centre, how does that affect the hotel aspect? Because we did help fund the redevelopment of that. How does that stack up financially? Thank you.
It's a good thing because we've obviously still got a financial stake in the hotel. If the hotel wasn't there, some of the options of what you would do with the Cleveland Centre might be slightly different, because at the moment you've got a very well performing hotel sat on the roof effectively, and other things sat up there as well. So what you wouldn't do is demolish the building. So even if all the retail went, that probably wouldn't be the plan. So it constrains a little bit what our longer term options are, or it certainly points you in a different direction. But the fact that the hotel is there is very good for the centre, and the fact that we've got control of the centre is very good for the hotel, because it means that we can work together as we are at the moment on potential expansion of the hotel, how that would fit in with a remodelled entrance into the centre. And the thing that I think has always been a bugbear, how do we reopen the link properly from the centre onto Centre Square? So we're able to work with everybody at the hotel around all of that a lot more easily than they would ever have been able to do with the asset managers that were controlling the centre previously.
Thank you, Richard.
Councillor Davison. Dorothy, you've got your hand up. Hello.
Thank you. I'm just trying to unmute this today. I'm rather concerned about what you said about the endeavour, Richard. Councillor Saunders brought it up, and I felt your comments sounded to me as if we weren't going to do or consider anything about it. It's more or less to put away and we're going to forget about it. And I don't think that's what people of the town would want.
Sorry, just to clarify that then, Councillor, what we are doing at the moment with the Cleveland Centre is trying to understand what the long-term structural options are. So if you look, for example, at an aerial picture of it with the plan, it naturally cuts into four because you've got the route through the middle in both directions. So what we're trying to do is look at coming up with a situation that we're comfortable with to say, well, in the long run, if there is a reduction of retail, we'd prefer it to be in this quarter. We might pursue other options for the other 3 quarters, and we might try and have them as discrete buildings that are accessed from the outside rather than an internal mall as you've got at the moment. Until we've done that, we don't want to do anything structural in there because we might end up doing it twice. So it's not that we're not even thinking about the ship at the minute. We know that that's a question we need to answer, but until we've decided what the longer term internal makeup's likely to be, it's not something that we would spend money on because we might end up moving it again.
Yeah, I totally agree what you say there. That's about the Cleveland Centre, but we can't forget about this Endeavour ship, even if it goes somewhere else, Richard. It can't just be mothballed totally again.
No, I agree.
I absolutely totally agree with you, Councillor Davison. We've got the Cleveland Centre, which was previous home. We have a centre what we've bought with Captain Cook Centre, and we have, don't forget, the jewel in the crown, I'll always call it, is Stewart's Park, which is related to Captain Cook. So there is places, and I know it might cost money, but it is so relevant to the history of the town that should be displayed. That definitely should be displayed.
I totally agree with you, Councillor Saunders.
Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. Just comments, really. One of the things that you said, Richard, was that you're not going to do anything with the Cleveland Centre at the moment and the retail side of it. And I'm really pleased about that, because if we do get an arena, the arena is going to attract people from all over the place. And we could end up with a little really good retail facility there, because people will come for the day. And if we have a really good retail facility, that will attract them even more. So I hope that you don't make any decisions on the retail until other decisions have been made, if you like, because it could be good for us. Thank you.
Chair, could I just come back on that, please?
Of course you can, Richard, yeah.
we're certainly not looking to make any rash decisions about it. Absolutely. The reason why we're so bothered about working out what the longer term picture might be is not necessarily because we might want to move some of the retail in Cleveland Centre now, but we might want to fill some of the holes in there with retail from Captain Cook Square. And what, again, we don't want to do is move things twice. So if we can get a good view on where we think, which part of the Cleveland Centre is most likely to be financially successful, filled with retail, and try and fill those spaces in first. So you're right, we're not looking to make any decisions about kind of emptying bits of the Cleveland Centre or remodeling bits of it. We are looking at reusing some of the bits, like, you know, we're looking at selling large chunks of the car parking spaces to organisations because we know it needs to function commercially. But we're not looking to change anything in there that's kind of fundamental or irretrievable for future options.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Councillor Stefan Walker.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry if you've covered this before, Richard, but with all these acquisitions, I'm just curious, your internal management of like things like the tenancy agreement and collecting rent and well, all the consequences of effectively being a landlord of a large commercial premises. You know, there's a lot of growth. Are you confident your internal team is large enough to cope and manage with everything that's been taken on, or are you needing growth in your department to manage that?
That's a really difficult long-term issue for us, because it's not so much about whether we've got the size to do it. At the minute, we engage an asset management company who worked with us all the way through the purchases and have taken over the running of them, which is Praxis. So they nationally run shopping centres for people. I wouldn't ever want us to be running the shopping centre in terms of my kind of directorate and our teams, because it's not something that we have the skills to do. The other issue for me is, if the council is the landlord, it's very difficult to get tough with the tenants when they're not paying rent. And the first thing that would happen is, you know, if we say to somebody, well, if you're not going to pay your arrears, we're going to have to throw you out, they will then head towards the politicians. They'll head towards, Tony usually gets them as well, because they don't see the council as needing to operate commercially. Whereas when it's an asset management company and we're at a bit of a distance, it's a totally different relationship with them. As we find it at Boho, where we are the landlord and the support organisation, it really muddies the waters when you go to see a business to say, you know, can we talk about your growth aspirations? The first thing they want to talk about is, are they going to get any rent back from when the hot water was off? And we really want to avoid that scenario within the centres by keeping some sort of differentiation between the teams that are looking to fill the areas and make them successful and the ones who will do a lot of that kind of tenancy management, if you like. But I know over the next probably 6 months, we've got to make a decision as to, do we bring any of that in-house? And I think there is an appetite to bring some of that in-house, because we do manage commercial property. We do a good job of filling and managing the tenancies in there. It's probably slightly different in Captain Cook Square and the Cleveland Centre. So I doubt we could do all of it ourselves. So I don't think the regeneration end of things, we want to have any greater involvement in it than we've currently got. I think from a council perspective, we could probably do more than we're doing now, and therefore not have to pay somebody else to do it. I think the difficult thing is getting the balance right. So there's going to be some work that goes on, because I think the contract currently runs till November. So there's going to be some work to look at options, and again, do we do parts of that ourselves? But it's a really thorny issue, that one.
Thank you, Richard. I can't see no more hands up, Richard, so I'd like to thank you for your update. Really interesting, and obviously the questions which was put to you is obviously everybody's interested in what's happening in Middlesbrough, which is a really good thing.
Yeah.
Very much, Richard. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Agenda item number 9 is the any other urgent items. I have none. The next date and time for the next OSB meeting is Wednesday, the 27th of April at 10 o'clock, 10 a.m. I'd just like to thank all the officers who attended this morning. Thank you very much. And obviously I'd like to thank all the members who attended, and enjoy the rest of your day. And if you're going outside, put some sun cream on, especially if you've got a bald head like me and Mr. Kipnick here. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you, Chair. Factor 50, I think, for you, Mick.
Absolutely, yeah.
Hasta luego.